to anything will change.
Hello, we are troubleshooting the Techno Podcasts live streaming features. So if you've stumbled upon this, welcome. We talk about digital wellness, we talk about how to live a balanced life amidst the digital age and technology, and hopefully this is everywhere that it says it's streaming. Yeah.
I can say that having just toggled Windows, I think successfully for the first time, that having just left from the YouTube window, that
Yeah,
looks like we are streaming on YouTube, which is which is a beautiful thing.
absolutely. I Yeah, we're live. Oh, that's so good. Okay.
Fabulous.
I'm so glad that it's working. All
Well,
right.
leave it to YouTube to be, the sort of the go-to, right? The go-to textbook example of like if you're going to live stream elsewhere, do it there first. Do it there first.
Yeah.
What a journey
What a
this whole
journey.
process is.
Yeah.
A
Do we want to
journey
talk
between
about digital wellness, like what it is, since it's working now?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Beautiful. Do you know, how do you define digital wellness?
I I feel like I have no fixed definition of it. Like it isn't one. I don't feel like it's one static thing. I believe that it's a kinetic thing, and I don't mean to just kind of dwell within a metaphor, but I do feel like it is it is a state of mind or a state of being that one can possess in relationship to devices, any suite of devices or any one particular device, um, and is constantly in flux. That's what I think digital wellness is that it can shift day to day, mood to mood, um, workload to workload, stress load to stress load.
Yeah.
So if I try and really condense all that into a definition, is that it is a state of being, a state of mind uh, that one can access in relationship to devices that feels balanced.
Nice. I also lean on the word balance
Mm.
because of my background as a feng shui consultant, and so much of my work is bringing people's homes or office physical spaces into like an optimum state of balance to support them, which is part of why I liked leaning into digital wellness work, uh, and studying with the Digital Wellness Institute, because they define digital wellness as the optimum state of health and well being that each individual using technology is capable of achieving.
Hmm.
So I think, same, but different words.
Yeah, many ways to say the same thing.
When I've done talks on digital wellness and I ask people what they think it is during a talk, I get a lot of answers specifically just confused about what wellness is.
Yeah.
And I think wellness is also a pretty new term. Um, I can Google what it means, but in general, I think it's interesting to like know that wellness is a concept that is is semi new in the zeitgeist, and it's not just like good health, it's everything being in alignment so that you can like reach a goal. And to me that's really interesting because it's not all cultures have like a hustle culture kind of approach to life. And so for
It's
them,
only ours.
wellness is not the same. Yeah, it's not towards a goal. I think that that's part of why I like working with you is both of our previous experience really calls upon mindfulness. How can we
Mm,
be present? How can we look at um, cultures that really focus on how to be embodied and aware and in oneself? And so I think in the context of digital wellness, that's really interesting because the digital space is actively inviting us like out of ourself all the
hmm
time. It's saying, hey, look over here.
It's saying, "Hey, look over here," but it's also it's selling you on connection. It's selling you on or connectivity, really,
Yeah.
to others, to communities, to groups, and but what ends up happening is as we know, or as more and more people are beginning to not just know, but to understand it from a place of experience,
Yeah.
is that it's our our mouse clicks or our swiping. It's the data. It's the data that we keep creating
Yeah.
for these um, really for these devices or for these platforms, social platforms in particular, that then turns into um, points of sale, like usable bytes to to basically flip it back on us for the purposes of advertising.
I think you're right that digital wellness then becomes like a moving target, even from when I started in this space. So, the way that I always introduce digital wellness to people is that, like, I came into it in 2017. I was noticing that my feng shui clients' remedies were not landing.
Mm,
I would give them things to do, but then it didn't really change their behaviors, which is not usually how feng shui works. Usually, you give a remedy, it neutralizes the problem or it enhances what we want to make better. And so I started examining what was changing. And the thing that was changing was the introduction of technology, having a phone always attached to your hand, having televisions in bedrooms, having computers come with people into bedrooms at night. And so it became really obvious to me that these digital spaces also needed to be addressed in order to feng shui something. And so my like digital feng shui work started. Um, and in that sort of deep dive, studying with the Digital Wellness Institute, I feel like I learned a lot about the history surrounding digital wellness. And I'm just going to give a quick overview so that people know and you know these things, but maybe you'll also find it interesting. Basically, we live in what is now being called the digital age or the information age. And this started after about the 1970s with the popularization of the personal computer. So, in your lifetime, in my lifetime, we have seen this migration, is the way that I like to think of it, from physical ways of doing business and existing into a digital way of doing things and existing. And so this information age is really characterized by us being to able to transfer information hypothetically quote unquote freely, but mostly just like quickly. It's really sped up how things are working. And that led to what we're calling, or like what researchers and everyone in this space refers to as the attention economy. So, what you were just discussing, like how we're creating content, we're in these spaces, we're spending time on these devices. Um, that's our attention being sucked into something. And I think that the reason that I'm really interested in the history of this space and how digital wellness impacts us is because it's really obvious, in my opinion, that there's actually like a big digital overwhelm. Like the presenting problem that we're faced with is that the average smartphone user, if I'm remembering the statistic correctly, they'll check their phones like 47 times a day. And so that's around like 7,000 times a year that you're letting this tool be a large part of your life. And so if that tool isn't set up to support you and your highest good and the things that you're aspiring to, then that can become very overwhelming. And I think that there needs to be a holistic approach to technology, not just like a tech is bad, don't use your phone kind of approach, which is all that existed in 2017 when I started in this space. It was like, don't give kids phones, don't give anyone phones. Um, to really shift towards like, this is a tool. How do we make this tool work for us? And I think that for the most part, knowledge is power. And so we want to know how it's working, the history of it, and move forward sort of through an awareness of this is the digital age. There is digital overwhelm that comes with that massive amount of information, and that like we are participating in an attention economy just so that we can like be part of these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great, it's good to have that context, you know, for everyone, just timeline wise. Um, just looking at it from that, the onset of, you know, as we call it, the information age brought on by the personal computer, how it we brought it into the home or into the
Yes.
office, into our libraries, those kinds of things. And what I what I'm so fascinated about, just given, you know, the context with which you just provided, is even the notion of like, is this still a tool? Are we still treating this like a tool or like an appendage? Is it a part
Mm-hmm.
of us? I'm fascinated with how we as individuals or as societies or cultures begin to rely on the tool as as a sort of nervous system regulation
I do.
device.
Yeah.
And
I yeah.
there are even wearable devices that are made and marketed and sold specifically for to address anxiety and nervous system deregulation.
Yeah, I had one. It would like vibrate. I'd wear it on my hip and it would vibrate when my heartbeat changed. It really didn't. I feel like I feel like a lot of that technology is going how do I want to address this? I took a class at UCSD, an ethnic studies class called Monsters, Orphans and Robots. And I loved it because, well, for a variety of reasons, but one of the big ones was that he's like, you guys already are cyborgs. Like, a cyborg is someone with hardware like built into them. And at this point, if you're sleeping with your phone next to you, if you never turn your phone off, if you notice that your phone is like always on empty and then you charge it and keep using it, like you're a cyborg. That thing never leaves your side. And I think it's hard to be a healthy cyborg. I guess that's my argument with digital wellness is that we're going to keep moving more and more towards being cyborgs. I don't think that we can escape that. And so we need to learn how to manage it and create healthy habits now as it's being created, how to generate, as Tristan Harris like spoke about it, like ethical technology that like is really thinking about, is this good for human beings, not just like good for someone's, market value or
Mm-hmm.
market share.
Mm-hmm.
And I think is like, because it's not going anywhere. Like I remember really hating my first like computer as a kid, playing Madeline. Like it would give me a headache and I didn't want to play like things on the computer. I didn't actually like the computer that much. Um it's only been 20 years since that, like those first computers that were sitting on our desktops and were fucking huge. So like it's going to keep exponentially getting faster and faster, and so we need to, I feel like you and I, our goal here is to like share actionable tools that people can be like, oh, this is just a tool, like I can put it down and do something else, or I can shift it to black and white mode and that'll make it easier to like not engage with it at night.
I want to give you a real life example of what you're saying and how much I agree with it from an observational perspective. Last night I went to a concert last minute that I'm like, I love, I miss going to concerts. And so I'm like having just gotten over COVID myself,
Yeah.
and like, slowly coming out of the cave. Um, and the show was like literally around the corner. I could just walk there in 5 minutes. And just to try and just to try and synthesize this idea of going to a concert or going to like a play or performance of any type is this collective experience of we are paying money for an entrance fee. We're paying an entrance fee to watch someone believe in themselves as they perform. So just I'm going to pause on that. I'm going to just tape that up here for a second. Being out in public like that, like being in a crowded room, in a crowded venue of people with phones, because everybody's got a smartphone of some type, and noticing immediately that person they don't block their blue light. This person, it's like immediately becoming hyper aware of how other people exist in the same universe, same objective universe, but very differently through these different settings that they have going on. And obviously, the blue light was just the most obvious example because we're in a dark venue watching a performance. The reason why I bring up this story is that it seems like, and it seems, this is just subjectively speaking, that most people aren't even aware of the fact that they have settings that they can toggle and control and make changes to their lives, their families' lives, that arguably will benefit their lives.
Yeah.
But there isn't even like the most crude example of this. Again, this is not even a story. It's just an example of being out in the world. How many people do you know? Probably, and again, I don't want to peg this on older generations in particular, but just as an example, how many people do you know who own smartphones, who self-profess as like, I don't know how to use this thing. My son gave it to me or my daughter gave it to me, and I'm using it so I can use WhatsApp and make video calls and send a text message.
Yeah.
But they don't know the first thing about toggling settings or making changes to, so, and I look at those observations and I think to myself, are these major design flaws from the companies themselves, or is this like a societal condition of we don't even recognize the fact that we are cyborgs, or that we have the power to toggle settings, make changes, and like actually have a better day-to-day experience of my life with the tool?
I would argue that it's the responsibility of the tech company to create a tool over time that improves. And I think what we've seen is people, like the tech companies, becoming aware. Like in 2018, 2019, digital wellness features on smartphones became a thing. And those will track, that's what's tracking like how often you're using your phone and whatnot. But that was because there was a large contingent, primarily of moms, who were pissed off about like phone addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their way of sort of quieting them. So my point being that I haven't seen a lot of tech companies that are able to grow in our current digital age 21st century culture without funding market share, people investing in it. And so it's not being designed to be good for the consumer, it's being designed to be profitable for the company. it makes me, you shared your example about older people using phones. It makes me think about when I use a computer. So I like have had my computers die a variety of times or be stolen, and I just do not get a new one for years at a time. The longest I've gone is 2 years without a laptop. And I felt really good about it because I went through, a barefoot phase where I walked barefoot everywhere for 2 years. Like I've done my whole hippie thing. And in that process, I didn't learn what other people see as like basic parts of using tech. So my partner will watch me type things on my phone and take it away because I'm so slow. Or he'll watch me like type things in a computer, but I don't use the shortcuts. Like if I need to copy something, I like right click, drag down, press copy. I know how to do like a control V, but he can do it so fast and it's just part of him and his system. He learned it.
Mm,
He grew up with the tech. Whereas I like consciously stepped away from the tech for so much of my like college years that I still don't know it. And it's interesting to be on like the side where you're just like, I don't really want to learn it. Like, why isn't there a tool that does what I want? Like, why do I have to meet this tool where it's at?
mm,
When I just want, and I've thought about switching to just an old flip phone or something, but, and this is like really the crux of digital wellness for me, I need maps. I would not exist in New York and Brooklyn as I do without maps. And that doesn't happen without a smartphone. Like I couldn't have lived here as effectively 20 years ago because there weren't maps. So a lot of these tools are beneficial, but there's so much competition from companies and apps, especially. I'm so happy the app race is kind of over, to get our attention. That if we don't know that we're a part of an attention economy, we're already so far behind in these
mm.
conversations. And so I feel like that's what the point of this podcast is we want people to know about tech know, like please know that these things are happening quickly and that you're part of them if you pick up any bit of technology, if you use a computer, if you use a laptop, if you watch TV, if you have a phone.
If you've picked it up, you've consented to the terms, whether you read it or not. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, very messy. That makes me think about, so studying with the Digital Wellness Institute, they have like 8 sections of sort of overarching topics around digital topics that can help you, like they call it digital flourishing in the digital age. And one of those, really, I think that idea of like privacy is really covered by a few of the things on the wheel. So the wheel has productivity, environment, communication, relationships, mental health, physical health, quantified self, and digital self. And so I teach in the environment section, I teach digital feng shui. I talk about how to set up your office, work from home, things like that. Um, but overall, just it's so interesting that we, in like a hope to be more productive, have relinquished our privacy. In a hope to be more connected, have like really not looked into digital citizenship or what it means to exist in this like wild west of the digital space. In a hope to be liked, we've kind of relinquished our privacy with apps like Instagram, Facebook, all these like social apps where we're quantifying who we are through likes, through engagement, through people commenting. And I think to a certain extent, like we've affected people's physical health by like really not respecting autonomy and privacy with these phones. It's also affected mental health, relationships, communication. But I just think it's interesting that there's so much that is affected, and yet we're not having any conversations about it in the general population. Like the talks I go to talk about it, but that's a small portion of society that's really interested in like what are these things, what are these devices doing to us. And then instead of just being like they're bad, because I'd say 50% of the groups out there doing these conversations, that is their approach. They're like, oh, it's bad. Like, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't help if it's bad. We just need to know about it. We need to have tools like make the tool just go back to being a hammer. We don't like carry a hammer around all day, every day, thinking like I'm gonna need this for everything. You set it down when you're done. And so retraining that into us is part of what I am invested in.
Ditto. I have the same investment, especially again, also myself having gone through that digital wellness certificate course with the Institute, and really appreciating that the model that they present, right, the flourishing model, the way it kind of demystifies, just starts to create context, right? The 8 different sections. It's not necessarily to think categorically. It's just to like give a larger, holistic kind of context to like what is it that we're dealing with? Because everyone, anyone who uses a smartphone in any capacity, whether it's for work, whether if you're a Lyft or Uber driver, or you it's in the same way, like you work for Instacart or something, you're a personal shopper,
Yeah.
or you're a parent who's responsible for children. Like it this affects everyone. So I think it's really I find it helpful, um as a speaker and as a coach myself, when I begin to raise awareness about digital wellness at large, especially particularly within the context of like corporate wellness or employee wellness.
Hmm.
I find it useful to remind people that like we, as particularly as a Western society, right, we have this kind of pre-existing model of what health and wellness constitutes. There's sleep, there's movement or exercise, there's nourishment or food, um, and there's like personal hygiene, things like that. But there really needs to be, we need an updated model or template that includes these things, right?
Yeah.
Like digital habit, and call it whatever we want. We can call it digital wellness or digital habits. Um, a label is it's irrelevant at this point. It's really like we live with these things in the same way that we live with in our homes, with our refrigerators, with our food, with our tools, other tools that we use to to feed
Yeah.
or nourish ourselves, to make things to work. And it's just like if we aren't paying just a little more attention to like how we feel in relation to these things, you could choose. You always have a choice to decide.
Well, they're very addicting.
Yes.
And I think that I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I think that the first step is people recognizing that there's a history and it's happening very quickly and that they're participating in it unconsciously. So to introduce a consciousness around it by saying, this current thing that we're all living through, this is a digital migration. We're literally starting to have people want to just exist in a metaverse.
Hmm.
Like, we need to be able to talk about how bizarre that is when we still have all these other things going on in the world. And also that there's, or to the same sort of effect, if you don't know what the attention economy is, if you don't know, I think I say this every time I have a conversation about digital wellness, but if you don't know what the hook model is, if you don't know that there was a movement in the early aughts where people were codifying, writing down the exact ways to make habit forming technology that is purposely addictive, and that the majority of the social media and apps that we were introduced to in the early 2000s as this like new exciting digital world was coming forth, that those were designed to be addictive because they have the same system as a slot machine. You're getting a variable reward, you're getting a little dopamine hit through the tribe, through yourself, and through the tribe, self, and
The
hunt.
hunt. Yeah.
The hunt. And so if we don't know that, if we don't haven't like been taught in the same way that people know the Pledge of Allegiance, which different conversation, but like if you don't have that just built into you, knowing like, oh, when I scroll through something for hours, it's an infinite scroll because they know I'm going to keep looking for the next interesting thing. That's the hunt. Like if you don't know that part of why you like open your app is to see how many people have liked a new photo, and that they purposely designed the like button to increase engagement, then it really changes how you feel about that like button, you know, and like how seriously you take and ingrain that information about yourself. That's the self. And then the tribe, like all of these all of these apps have messenger things built into them, so you have to like go into the app to find your community. um you know, I always like to bring things back into like really grounded examples with my feng shui clients, my digital feng shui clients. And so for me, what feels really interesting to compare this to is when you wanted to talk to someone, let's say you're in like a Jane Austen film in what, you know, 1700s. You wrote a letter maybe a few times because you like messed up. You really thought about it, like put it somewhere with a carrier who you trusted, and like sent it off, and it went to a physical house. There was just so many more layers of intentionality that do not exist anymore, I think, to a certain extent with technology. And so if we don't keep remembering where we came from, and we don't see how quickly the timeline and the history are progressing, and they don't become a normal part of our conversations about life and how we're doing things, I'm not, I don't want to be too doom and gloom. I just think it's so important to know the history of digital wellness and of these digital spaces and the fights that are currently happening to make sure that we have autonomy and ethical technology production.
A really great resource for historical context, actually. If anyone, that'll be watching this now or in the future, um, likes learning through both through audiobook or through like a documentary that's really engaging on like very different subtle levels, is a documentary called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace by a documentarian named Adam Curtis. I've learned a lot in this sort of before coming to the Institute. I learned a lot about tech. I learned a lot about history, um, specifically, in context of this topic, this subject matter through his works. Another really big piece is called The Century of the Self, which is like this 4 hour long series. It's all basically BBC documentaries. It's amazing journalistic and historically accurate work. So just to put that out there, maybe I'll find a way to sort of add it in the comments or something, or then
Yeah.
some kind of show notes. It's very, very important that more and more people are not just aware of what is happening, right? We've had these sort of kind of cultural zeitgeist moments where there's been an increase, of awareness, right? With the social dilemma, with the work that Tristan and the Center for Humane Tech does, amongst other organizations. Um, but more and more, we need to have a history lesson, because as we barrel forward, being hit with a fire hose of info, disinfo,
Hmm.
opinions that aren't really opinions just for opinion's sake. We just get hit by a fire hose of tweets that may or may not be sent from people, but actually from bots or something like that. There is no space. There is no personal space to actually formulate a feeling or an opinion.
Yeah,
There's no chance for discernment or for critical thinking,
totally.
and that's a big red flag, um, for me personally, and I hope for more and more people. And I don't know where I was going with this, but all of it's in yeah, just in general agreement with what you're saying.
I mean, I have some stats that I think
Yeah.
I wrote down when I was doing the Digital Wellness Institute that are interesting. So we've got like the average adult spends 4 hours a day on their smartphone with
Mm,
an annual increase of 11 minutes each year. This is from
mhm.
2019. I mean, easily spend more than that. because I just have it like playing things in the background while I'm doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
So to that, like not knowing your center, it's like there's always a distraction. Um, what else was interesting? Oh yeah, 71% of people sleep with or next to their phone, according to the Huffington Post in 2015.
Yep.
I'm hoping that that's decreasing, but I imagine it's about the same. This one's like really sad, but I definitely do this as well. 85% of people say they use their phone while talking to family, friends, or during meetings.
Mm-hmm.
That was from Statista in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's interesting. I mean, we have the stats, but these are not conversations that are casually happening. And so I want to
Hmm.
put these stats like into the zeitgeist. Um, what else? There was another good one. It was about limiting usage. Oh yeah, 74% of people report having tried to limit their smartphone use, and 30% have done so successfully, from a 2018 study.
And that 2018 feels like a lifetime ago, to be
I
honest.
know. Like pre-pandemic, I feel like these stats must have just skyrocketed. I mean, I during the pandemic easily could spend 8 hours a day scrolling on my phone,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to figure out what was going on. And that was it. I just wanted to know what was going on, and I just scroll and scroll and scroll.
You and me and the rest of society, absolutely. Like it has increased exponentially for good and bad reasons, or for whatever reasons we have. And it's such a large it's such a large topic.
Yeah. Well, I
And
think
to
that
and to begin to be, yeah.
well, I was going to say I think that the thing that I always come back to when I give talks about digital feng shui, at least, is that with these tools, we feel like we can do a bunch of things at once. But being intentional, as I'm sure you know, conducting tea ceremonies, like presence means consciously choosing not to do a bunch of things at once. And so I think there's this myth that was really pervasive from about the 50s till now. And it's starting to like, I don't know. I think Gen Z and younger kids, the kids I nannied at least and babysat, I feel like younger kids have this like, ugh, too much tech. Like, get away from me. I want to be like, they're like on a different kick, which is great. But I'd say everyone a little bit older than that is locked in this idea that multitasking is beneficial. And so I see the age of information as really like amplifying the myth of multitasking, that you can actually do a bunch of things at once. Because it's like that stat about how 85% of people will like scroll on their phone while talking to friends and family. You feel like, oh, this isn't worth my time. But then why are you doing the other thing that wasn't worth your time? I think there's a time and a place for like listening to a podcast while doing the dishes. But at the same time, I've been part of like mindfulness studies. I've done a lot of meditation, and part of like doing the dishes is being present with like the water and the warmth and how it feels and the soap. And I really think you hit the nail on the head by talking about like how do we know what we actually want? Like how we don't want to be like empty vessels that we fill up with stuff from this external device. We want to like have our own well. You just took too long to answer.
I know, and I take a lot of pause,
I love
and
it. I
that's
love
and
it.
that's one of my design flaws slash features.
I think it's great.
I think something that I want to include in this conversation, that I include in any sort of public speaking engagement, is just this, something that I got from another great source for people if they want to understand what's going on from engaging in a book, is reading Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism,
Yeah.
which is kind of a big call to arms in a way, as I received that book. it's also feels very dated in the sense that it was probably published sometime in the last 4 to 6 years or 3 to 6 years. And what he offers as a here's what you can do, like he basically lays out this history lesson as a sort of framework for here's how to take a 30-day smartphone detox. And the idea of a 30-day smartphone detox now, given where we are at now as a society or as individuals, having survived this pandemic as it continues, or surviving the sort of transformation of work as we know it. A 30-day smartphone detox sounds like a big ask for just
Yeah.
about anyone. For me as a parent,
Yeah.
for you, I mean, for anyone. So the way that you and I can exist as service providers, as a digital feng shui practitioner, as a digital habits coach, is that we can be these sort of phone coaches, and for lack of a better term, and really offer to help folks figure out what a smartphone change can look like that's unique to them,
Yeah.
their lives, their needs, their demands, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But again, the reason why I bring up digital minimalism as a resource is that he talks about solitude deprivation
Yeah.
as a sort of kind of a deranged feature of why we keep reaching for dopamine hits, why we feel like I can't just wash the dishes. I need to listen to this audiobook so I can learn about that skill, so I can go out and crush it and kill it and do
Yeah.
all these other things. Again, not to
The myth
say
of multitasking.
the myth of multitask, not to say that like I do listen to stories or podcasts while I wash the dishes. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. Why? Because having grown up, we used to have a telephone and a radio. These used to be separate devices that we would use intentionally for different reasons. And now I have a phone that I can just play a podcast while I wash the dishes and
Yeah.
and listen to this thing on my earbuds so that I don't disturb the rest of the household. It's just a kind of condensing of devices and tools in a way, right?
Totally.
But this idea of solitude deprivation
Yeah.
is something that really fascinates me because, again, if we're constantly pelted by info, notifications, disinfo, bots, robocalls, people's, like, why aren't you answering me? I need this. Like, if you're constantly dealing with that, you have no availability or bandwidth
Yeah.
to actually respond, to actually give yourself the permission to like have an intention to
Yeah.
perform a task or send a message or
Yeah.
write an email or that kind of thing. So yeah, that's something I really like to hone in on as well. Maybe we could do that another time as well.
I would love to, yeah, take a deeper dive into that. I'm excited you brought up Cal Newport because that reminds me in a 2020, like right before, maybe 2019, right before the pandemic, I was reading a book by Nir Eyal. He's one of the like guest teachers at the Digital
Hmm.
Wellness Institute, but he wrote Hooked, which was one of those habit forming technology books, and then felt real weird about it and went and wrote a second book, Indistractable, that discusses the need for solitude, that discusses the need for setting aside time to be with your thoughts, to feel out what it is you want and need. And that's another really good resource. And I know he was inspired by Cal Newport's digital minimalism, which I would also agree hasn't aged particularly well,
Hmm.
but I think is still like a good touch point for things that can be done. And I think it's really important that you flagged that, like, everyone, since we're all cyborgs at this point, like, everyone needs to be tweaked to fit their individual needs. There's no like blanket answers for, like, there are best practices, but I have yet to see one consistent thing that's helped every single person, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's important to know that digital wellness, like we started this conversation, it's a moving target, and there's just going to be things that do and don't make sense, and that's okay. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. I would love to just list off a few words that I always find are really important, like vocab words to have about digital wellness within this conversation. And we can maybe define these later on as the podcast grows. I think it'd be good to just note that these are things that are part of the last 15, 20 years. But we don't all have names for them. I have the names for them, like involuntary attention. That's a psychological term, but also like when you get notification alerts, and if you don't have your notifications turned off, like boom, you're right there. You're paying, you don't mean to pay attention, but you're going to go open Facebook or open Instagram or open whatever app it is. The bottomless bowl, like that is a Tristan Harris term, but this like endless scrolling, these are all things that I think need to be really explored. So we got always on, which I think culturally we're shifting away from after the pandemic, but before there was really an always on culture. The loneliness and epidemic, fubbing, which is when you're texting when like you should be paying attention to someone else. Stress debt, the hook model, we talked about that. The like doom scrolling, we talked about that. Decision fatigue, just like the constant overwhelm of information and how that affects you. Um, and autoplay, burnout, these are all things that we will eventually touch on in this podcast that just fall under this blanket of digital wellness and are useful to know. Like, it's not just you. Everyone is, not everyone, but there is a large group of people really struggling with these things.
Yeah. Very good thought out. I mean, important list of terms that we will need to, and we will like zoom in on each one of those terms, in a respective conversation. And just that, I think, in a way to start to recap, like
Yeah.
there is so much information regarding this topic, this subject, even though it feels somewhat new or novel, right? As you began this conversation with.
Yeah.
And that there's any entry point for people. There isn't one entry point, one place to start when it
Yeah.
comes to addressing, you know, uh, these issues.
Yeah. Well, the definition that we sort of focused on in the beginning of digital wellness is the optimum state of health that one can achieve, like, using technology. And so wellness is optimum state of health you can achieve. And we're adding in technology as like a part of our lives. We're becoming more and more like cyborgs. So we got to start dragging these things in and being aware of them, so that they don't. So we don't. I always end every talk with this, but like we don't want to become the tool. And the last 5 to 8 years, especially, it's so obvious that we've been the tool, that like our time spent online is being monetized by someone else. That means we're the tool. And so I really want to shift us all back to feeling like the phone, the computer, the tech is the tool, and we're using it instead of it using us.
100%. And, something I do want to touch on in order to, make room for in a future conversation is this the importance of reminding ourselves and each other that what we think as uh, anything regarding like metaverse or a space that we inhabit, we join, right? If it's a social platform, these are places or spaces that have been created, ecosystems that have been created by a company, by moneyed interest, to
Yeah.
give you this impression that like, oh, this is what the internet is, or this is what the metaverse is, or this is what VR is, this is what being social is on this platform. And more, these places need to exist within consensus, within like an agreed, like I'm experiencing this, you're experiencing this. Let's agree that uh, we want a social platform, or this, or utilizing this tech to access this platform uh, to be ethically, to be beneficial from an ethical perspective, or from an accessible perspective. Like it's not, it's like it's almost like three steps ahead of being aware that we've become these tools, we've become these bites of information for these, these money just to really begin to imagine or be curious or begin to engage in this idea of like, we need to either recreate these spaces or to improve these spaces as they exist, that's based on our actual needs and experiences. And we can
History is very cyclical. And so
yeah.
listening to you talk reminds me, I mentioned it briefly already in this podcast, but I think of the internet and the digital space as the Wild West.
Hmm.
And so we are still at, if we're just going to use United States history, we are still at the like tragic manifest destiny part of that, where
Hmm.
like the people climbing over each other trying to get to the gold rush.
Hmm.
And what we're seeing, if we want to extend that metaphor, is like the oil barons, is the train barons. We're seeing that with the tech companies. And so thinking about it as there is opportunity, but this time we have a chance to do it compassionately. This time we have a chance to do it with awareness. This time we can like mindfully notice what already exists in this space, what's beneficial, what's like good for humanity, and then just try to like move away from what isn't serving us. Um, because we're doomed to repeat history if we don't re-examine it. And so knowing this sort of digital wellness 101, knowing what it is, feels like more critical than ever.
Exactly. And as we, you know, uh, offer the information, or offer the context for the information, we will like we have this sort of macro and kind of philosophical and almost existential take on
Yeah.
it right now, for the purposes of like, we have our first live stream going, and it's, but we will also be focusing on a, we'll also do the micro next to the macro, and how important it is to like spend time, on that kind of nuance level as well. And
Yeah. That's where the change happens,
mhm,
is like actually seeing people. I'm so excited about the questions that have been submitted and
mhm,
answering people's real everyday questions about like, how do I get my email box to zero? Like how do I like you pick up my phone less? What is a digital wellness app? Like how do I use that on my phone? Like,
mhm,
why do I have so many tabs? I just feel like there's a bunch of questions that people have, and they're the mundane parts of technology, but that's where you start to make a change, is
mhm,
when we start to shift into a more mindful approach to those mundane parts of tech.
mhm.
Yeah, I hear ya. Well, this has been a very exciting first live stream. I feel like we always have so much fun talking. I always appreciate your knowledge. um, I love how dedicated you are to finding like all of the relevant things in this like area of research, not just like going off of what we learned at the institute, but really like seeing what's out there. So thank you.
And ditto. I mean, coming with that level of awareness when it comes to feng shui
Dude, it's just,
is important.
I love, so for everyone that's confused, this is a good point of clarification. Feng Shui, my lineage, we translate it as wind, water. And so it is a practice at looking at the elements looking at how nature does things. But I like to think of it as wind and water. Those are the two forces that are shaping our earth. So think about a wave like crashing up against a cliff and eroding it, or a river flowing down a stream and really shaping what that river looks like, and the wind blowing that water. And so we are the wind and the water force in our life. We are what can make the spaces that we inhabit support and bring to fruition the things that we want. And so I think of how I practice feng shui and how I practice digital feng shui in particular as we're making the spaces support our needs to get us to the goal. You can draw in all the classical feng shui, the Lopan compass, the whole idea of the five elements. And really, that stuff's great. And I love it. I'll talk about it for hours. But at the end of the day, I think that digital feng shui is so powerful because it's saying, and you said this right at the beginning of this chat, but like we get to choose what's happening to us. And these spaces can be constructed to support us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well said. Amazing. So yeah, we love receiving questions.
Yes. Send the questions.
Obviously, we have a lot of information between us,
Totally.
given our respective trainings, as well as shared training and life experience and subjective experience and interest and everything. So please submit questions. We'd love to address them. And in the future, in future episodes or future live streams, we'd also love to incorporate live call-ins as well, which we will be doing. So it's just super exciting moving forward. And
And
really
we
appreciate
have
you.
a beautiful array of people that are in this space already.
Mhm.
Other teachers that have taught with me at the Digital Wellness Institute, friends that I've made going to events in New York. I'm sure you have some good people in LA. So pulling in experts and interviewing them and asking them questions as well is something to be excited about, look forward to. Keep
Exactly.
an ear out for it.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. This is great. We are under 60 minutes. I'm so proud of us. I hope there's at least like 3 people that have tuned into this live stream. But if not, I think it was a good practice run for getting the word out there, making sure that people know what digital balance can be.
Yeah, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first live stream. The first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will talk to you guys soon.
Yes, we will.